Hello, everyone. You are listening to the latest Flyers Talk podcast presented by Great Railing. I am Jordan Hall, and as always, I am joined by the dynamic Joe Fordyce. Joe, no Carter Hart, no problem for the Flyers Tuesday night against the Blues. The offense breaks out for 5 goals. They win 5-1. Joe, they had scored 4 goals over their previous 3 games combined. They go off for 5 against St. Louis, and they are 7-3-2. And it definitely feels like they're playing for one another. It may sound cliche, but they play hard and they play for one another. And they're getting results because of it. It seems like these are John Tortorella trademarks, and we're seeing them early in the season. What do you think?
Yeah, and you know what's interesting is the day after John Tortorella said it's going to be a dogfight every night for us because we're not going to fill the net, they fill the net, and it's not – I mean, outside of a few minutes in the third period – it really wasn't a dogfight. Now, St. Louis is in a bad way. But that said, I mean, you have to take advantage of playing teams that are in a bad way if you're in a good way. And the Flyers happen to be getting a few of them right now. Ottawa, they're in a bad stretch, and they get them again coming up later this weekend. They get Columbus. So you have to take advantage of it. And, you know, I feel like this team is approaching every game the same way, and it doesn't matter if you're playing Columbus, Ottawa, or you're playing the Rangers at the Garden. It's, they grind out wins, and they play for each other, which you mentioned there. And I think that really nothing was more evident than the last game that Felix Sandström had played. Scott Lawton talked about how they have to get him a win, and then they've really hung him out to dry. And then last night, almost to a man after the game, you heard them all talk about how good it was to get him his first NHL win. And the guys all seem to be – John Tortorella is big on accountability. I don't think accountability just means player to coach. I think it definitely means accountability to one another in that dressing room, and you're seeing it and you're hearing the guys, and aside from what they say, you're seeing it on the ice. I mean, I think the Blues were out there trying to send a message last night early, but the Flyers go out there, you have Nick Seeler and you have Zach McEwen jump in there early in fights. You have at every opportunity, these guys are sticking up for one another. And I think it's part of that accountability is we need to be accountable to each other and not just our head coach. And I think that starts with the head coach and comes on down. And like you said, we're seeing the trademarks of a John Tortorella team early in this season, and we're basically seeing his whole resume play out in front of us. The question is, at what point does the talent level on the roster kind of become a thing? Because, he said it too. I'm not breaking news when I say there's going to be games when you get to the middle days of the season where the talent deficit is just going to show itself. And but you can only worry about the games that are in front of you at the moment. And, this team's in a good way right now.
I think that's a fair concern, Joe. It is a long season, and guys are going to get tired, and you're going to see sometimes talent just take over. When guys are tired, sometimes talent just takes over. Talented teams can get by when they're on the second game of a back-to-back, or they're not playing at their best, but they are still very good when they're at their best. But it was nice to see Felix Sandström get that win. First career win in the NHL. Carter Hart was out because of an illness. He was expected to start, but Sandstrom got to start instead. And it was nice to actually see Sandstrom in that spot because his previous 3 games were all in the second game of back-to-backs. And those are not easy spots, but that is the job of a backup. But you think in those games, typically the skaters are a little more tired from the night before. Maybe they don't play as – I'm not going to say they don't play as hard, but they're just not as fresh and they're not as sharp. It's just a tough night on goalies in those situations. So he had not had anything easy in his starts. He gets one here at home against a struggling team, and the Flyers responded for him in front. That was good to see. Joe, I do wonder how often John Tortorella will push his guys, how often he'll call them out. He seems like he's pushed the right button so far in terms of challenging guys, whether it be in the media, talking about this guy isn't meeting expectations or he's not playing the way I think he should, or whether it's behind closed doors. But I do wonder, eventually, does that type of stuff run dry? Like, how frequently can he do it? How often will players respond to it well? Does he need to pick and choose his spots? I do wonder how that will shake out, because I do think eventually sometimes guys getting criticized every single day might not respond to it all the time, especially if losses start to pile up and frustration starts to brew. But it'll be interesting to see how John Tortorella balances that all. But I do think he has pushed the right button so far. It seems like when he challenges a guy, they respond.
Yeah, and we talked about this last night on pregame live. Michael Barkan and Al were talking about the balancing act of praise versus criticism and kind of just keeping it in the middle. And, we've seen him, last week, Wade Allison has a couple goals in a game, or a goal and 2 assists. He had 3 points in whatever game. And afterwards it was kind of like, yeah, but he plays too laterally, like, it's like this, yeah, he played a good game, but, and you don't let guys get too high, and you don't let them get too low. He talked both yesterday and the day before, yesterday before the game, about what that Ottawa game meant and how proud he was of the guy. So it seems like when there's praise, it's widespread, and when there's criticism, it's a little more individualized. I mean, for veterans, that could get a little tiresome after a while. It hasn't yet. I mean, these guys seem to be answering the bell. We saw it with Konechny. We've seen it with Hayes. We saw it with Rasmus Ristolainen, maybe to a lesser extent. I mean, I thought he played a pretty good game last night. He was not inserted back in the lineup with his normal D pair partner in Sanheim. He was on the third pair, I believe, for that entire game last night, right? You didn't notice him jump up at all, right?
I didn't, and he only played around 16 or so minutes. Typically, I would say he's at least 20.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably easing him back in. And, and Tortorella won't allude to it, but I would imagine the physical limitations might be there still from the injury. So he's not going to say that, but one would think there's probably some of that lingering. So they're kind of, playing him on a pitch count type of thing. And but I still think he answered last night. And, how long will it last, I think, will be the big question. I don't think we've really seen, outside of maybe the Toronto game and the shutout at home where Hayes and Konechny got benched. I mean, I don't think we've really seen this team on too many lows. So that, to me, is yet to be seen. Where you kind of just lose a game. Maybe the Toronto game is the best example, where you lose a game and it's talent based, and not, we can point the finger and say, okay, that play, that stretch, this shift, that turnover was the reason we lost. It was just, they have Austin Matthews, they have Mitch Marner, we don't, kind of, and there's only so much you can do about that. So I do think that that's going to be an interesting thing to see over a long season.
Flyers Talk is brought to you by Great Railing. Stop into Great Railing for the highest quality and lowest prices on all your railing, decking, and fencing needs. I don't think they've had an egregious loss yet, so I am interested, Joe, as well, to see how they respond to something of that nature. Maybe the worst loss was the Maple Leafs. It was 5-2, but that's a 3-2 game in the third period.
I would say the San Jose loss is probably the worst one, because you get shut out by a team that everyone thinks is in the running for the worst in the NHL on your home ice, and 2 of your top forwards get benched in the game. that's probably the loss that has the most like beat down effect to it. Because if you remember that, I mean, there didn't seem to be, once those two guys got benched, I think everybody kind of thought, okay, they're not going to score in this game. And so, and that didn't have to do with talent, because I don't think, San Jose has some talented players. I don't think there's a talent deficit when it comes to San Jose.
Yeah, John Tortorella probably won't admit it, but he almost waved.
That was a message sending game. He almost said, okay, we're going to lose this one, and I'm going to make an example out of a couple of guys. He never said specifically what it was for, but the guys seemed to understand it. So I would say that's the worst loss so far. But outside of that, I don't find the Toronto loss egregious. The best teams in the league could go into Toronto and get beat 5-2 on a night.
Yeah.
If Toronto's clicking. And the same can be said for, you go into Colorado on a night. You go into, name your team that has that kind of firepower on offense. You can go in there and get a big number put up on you any night of the season.
Yeah. Yeah, and John Tortorella probably won't admit it, but he really did almost wave the white flag in that Sharks game. They're already down James Van Riemsdyk, so they're already down at 4. Then he shortens his bench by 2 more guys, and it's his 2 top scorers in a game that they're trailing 2-0 and have a chance to come back. That was all to send a point, because he probably felt it was the right time early in the season to send a point and sacrifice really a chance to come back. But yeah, Joe, I think guys have responded in good ways. This week, Tortorella talks about Wade Allison doing some really frustrating things and playing East-West. And if he continues to play East-West, he'll East-West himself out of the lineup, he said. He criticizes Rasmus Ristolainen and says he flat out hasn't met expectations and he needs to be better to be in the lineup. And I thought both guys responded well. Allison goes right to the net, scores in the blue paint. And Ristolainen, I thought, had a really quietly good game. He blocks 2 big shots in 1 shift. So that's stuff John Tortorella loves. He was a +2. He was physical, but not too physical in the sense where he was taking himself out of the game. I just thought he had a good balance of physicality and positioning. And, again, guys wanting and welcoming criticism. So Tortorella has done some good things, and it's just hard to believe that they don't have Cam Atkinson, they don't have Sean Couturier, they don't have James Van Riemsdyk, and they have 7 wins in 12 games. I think you got to give some credit to John Tortorella, and really give some credit to players, young guys that are answering the bell, some veterans that are stepping up. Guys are filling roles that I think we all thought had to be filled. Kevin Hayes, Travis Konechny being go-to offensive guys, Carter Hart being a star in net, depth players, and then really the top defensive pair, D'Angelo and Provorov, I think has been great, really, all season. I don't think they've had too many hiccups. So kudos to those guys as well.
Yeah, and I while we're talking about guys answering the bell, the one that slipped my mind that just came to me is Travis Sanheim. He was mentioned by name the day before, 2 days ago, and then last night we see him have that assist, sort of like the one-time assist where he kind of cradled it and sent it across the crease on that great play to score. Which goal? Sedlak?
Noah Cates.
Oh, no, Cates' goal, yes.
Yep. Great play by Walton.
Yeah. Great passing and just a great play. And there were 2 other occasions in the first period where he jumps up in the play offensively and shows some of what we saw last year that I think was lacking in his game up to last night. And again, John Tortorella called it out. He was asked about it and called it out. It's not like he volunteered the information. He was asked about what he thought of Sanheim's game and said, and was critical of it. And then Sanheim goes out and answers the bell last night. So that's another guy, that we see answering the bell and looking last night a lot like the player he was last year, which is the reason that earned him the new contract that he got in the offseason. I mean, so again, these guys are responding to this coach, which is not unsimilar to the way it's been at John Tortorella's previous stops early on.
Sanheim had 1 point entering last night's game, and he matches that with an assist. And there's no doubt defensive play on the back end is not all about points, but Travis Sanheim needs to put up points, and the Flyers want him to. They want him to orchestrate offense, move the puck with his legs, make some things happen. And Tortorella likes that style. He likes aggressive mistakes. He wants his D-men to take that puck and go. And it reminded me a little bit of Cam York. What he was asking of Cam York during the preseason was, hey, be yourself. Show us something. Show us that skill that you have where you can take the puck and get us out of our own end just like that. And Sanheim has those skills. Big, smooth skater and offensively gifted. So I wonder if we'll see Sanheim go on a little bit of a surge here offensively because they could use it. They could use more than 2 points in 12 games from Travis Sanheim because they need to take some pressure off of D'Angelo and Provorov. I don't think you want to wear too much on those two guys. It's good when they're playing more 23, 24 minutes and not, in my opinion, 25, 26. So I think balance on the back end will be critical. Joe, do you have any concerns about their scoring? I know they put up 5 goals last night, but it didn't start until the back half of the game. I believe the first goal was scored after the 10 or 11 minute mark in the second period. Floodgates kind of open against a struggling team. I can't help but still remember 4 goals over the previous 3 games where I'm wondering, boy, does this dogfight style eventually wear on them and wear on their goalie?
Well, it could, and I just go back to what John Tortorella said on Monday, and that's that every night's going to be a dogfight because we're not going to fill the net. So it's a concern, but this is also who they are. It's not like you have guys that score 30 and 40 goals that aren't scoring. These guys are, in many cases, very inexperienced NHL players. The guys that are experienced are scoring. Konechny, we could probably use a few more goals from Hayes, but he's playmaking. He's got racking up some assists. And then you're getting, 3 goals already from Zach McEwen. I don't think that anybody would have thought that. But it's going to be a concern because this is who they are. And the coach acknowledges it. The players acknowledge it. And quite frankly, this is a stylistic kind of thing as well. I mean, John Tortorella, if you look back through his teams, and I'm not including the one he won the Stanley Cup with in Tampa, but the teams that he's coached after that point weren't exactly rich with goal scorers. So he knows how to coach teams like this, but it's a concern, but I don't think it's a concern that any of us didn't expect to be a concern because, I mean, the coach tells you it as many times as he possibly could. He mentions the lack of, the lack of firepower. I mean, that's due to personnel as well as injuries. I mean, you have guys out of the line. I mean, Cam Atkinson's out. We're not even talking about him. You almost forget that he's here. Mm-hmm. And it was questionable whether he was going to play opening night. And now he's not even skating. And you don't hear much talk about him. So, it's a concern for various different reasons, but I don't think it's a unexpected concern.
And I feel like Tortorella saying these things about not having the most offensively gifted team is a little bit of a message to his guys that, like, hey, we have to work hard to win and we have to defend to win and we have to play the right way to win. And just to remind them, yeah, we are not Alex Ovechkin, Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid. We are, teams with a team with a lot of, middle of the road, to be honest, middle of the road type of talent. Guys
and games like the one last week in Toronto remind you that scoring deficit and the talent deficit that we've talked about a couple of times during this podcast. They have Austin Matthews, they have Mitch Marner and William Nylander and these guys that create offense.
Yeah.
Just by being on the ice. And the Flyers don't have that. They don't have a wealth of guys that do that. And, it shows when teams like that are matched up against each other. And I think Al said it last night on the show a couple times that you can coach effort. And right now, that's what's happening with this team.
Yeah. And yeah, even their top two, go-to scorers are, I think, more playmakers than they are goal scorers. Kevin Hayes, for sure, I believe, is more of a playmaker than he is a goal scorer. And Travis Konechny is starting to look more and more like a guy that's going to facilitate a little more, make things happen than he is bury the puck in the net. But both can score goals. But my point being is, yeah, they're not littered with goal scorers, but they have guys that can play. They have talent. But they're going to need production from everyone. And right now, to their credit, they're getting guys chipping in. Lucas Sedlak comes in. He looks great on the fourth line, plays a hard game, and he can put the puck in the net a little bit. Wade Allison, some secondary scoring. Noah Cates last night breaks out point-wise with a couple. So nice secondary contributions, and a lot of that, it's cliche, but a lot of that is through hard work. If they're not working hard and playing the right way, those guys are not scoring some of those secondary points that the team desperately needs.
And we saw last night, you mentioned Sedlak. To me, Sedlak's goal changed the whole game last night because the third period starts with St. Louis on a power play. And really, after that power play expired, all the play was in St. Louis's offensive zone. They score a goal, and it started to look like things were going to roll downhill a little bit. And Sedlak's goal stopped all of that. Yeah. So that was to me the game-changing play last night. Was Lucas Sedlak's goal, and it comes as a result of hard work, like you said.
And we'll see if the Flyers can keep rolling here. Plenty of games coming up here on NBC Sports Philadelphia with tons of coverage on pre- and post-game live. Thursday, they're in Columbus. John Tortorella returns to his old stomping grounds for the first time since taking over the Flyers. And then Saturday, Sunday, 2 home games in the afternoon. Saturday against the Senators, Claude Giroux's return. And then Sunday against the Stars. All those games on NBC Sports Philadelphia with pre- and post-game live. Joe, are you pretty excited to see Giroux come back here in Philadelphia? I imagine this scene will be pretty special for fans and for him.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested to see what the Flyers have planned. We've kind of heard, us in the media that there's a ceremony, but they haven't really divulged a ton of details yet. So I think, and he talked about it last week before the game in Ottawa last weekend, that that's going to be a weird night when you're only used to playing, being in the home locker room in a building for, basically since 2006 when he was drafted. And you come back and you're in the visitors' locker room and you're on that ice that you played so many games and but you're wearing the other team jersey. That's got to be a really, really weird feeling. So I'm interested to see how that entire day goes. And you get the Saturday matinee, which there hasn't been as many of them in the last few seasons as there had been previously. So you should get a good crowd. Those are usually fan favorites, the matinee Saturdays.
Yeah, I think you'll see some good crowds this weekend. Obviously, Phillies are, unfortunately, you got eliminated from the World Series. Not sorry to bring that up, Philadelphia fans, but I think some focus is a little bit starting to shift towards Flyers, Sixers, and fall, and obviously, of course, the Eagles as well. So I think you'll see some good crowds, and I think a lot of people love Claude Giroux. So I expect Saturday to be a nice crowd for sure. But we'll have it all covered on NBC Sports Philadelphia. Plenty of hockey to go and watch and analyze, and we can't wait to see it all. Joe Fordyce, thank you so much as always. Great to see you and chat with you. Ben Berry, our podcast producer and guru, thanks so much as well for always being flexible with our time. And a big thank you, as always, to Flyers fans for listening to the latest Flyers Talk podcast presented by Great Railing. Wherever you get your podcast, please rate and listen, and we can't wait to talk to you next time.